Hey guys, it's Miss Bailey. Today we're going to be doing a lesson in math on measurement, and this is our unit on measurement. And last week we were talking about measuring time or elapsed time, like how much time goes by from the start to the end of an event. So today we're actually going to be measuring length. Which is just measuring from one endpoint to another endpoint on a particular object. So basically how long something is. So you guys know, what's going on with my hair? You guys know what length is though. So we're going to talk about customary measurement. And when I say customary, that's what we use in the United States mostly. So there's also metric measurement, and a lot of places around the world use metric measurement. And you will see it some in the United States, but typically what we see is customary measurement. So, and we're talking about length or sometimes distance. If it's a long length, we call that distance. So the way that we measure typically in the United States length with customary units of measure, we have an inch or inches, a foot or feet, a yard or yards, and a mile or miles. Okay. And we can also change from inches to feet, and we call that converting. So sort of like with time, if you have 60 seconds, that equals 1 minute. If you have 60 minutes, that equals 1 hour. So we're converting between units of measure, and we can do the same thing with measuring distance. And so let me scroll down a little bit. So 12 inches is equal to what? 12 inches is equal to 1 foot. So you can fill this in as you're watching the video, or you can just write it down and go back and fill it in later, whatever's easiest for you. Okay, well, if you have 3 feet, 3 feet is equal to something. What does 3 feet equal? 3 feet is equal to 1 yard. And then how many inches, though, if 3 feet are in 1 yard, how many inches are in 1 yard? Well, if 12 inches equals 1 foot, 3 feet equals 1 yard. Whoops. So if we multiply 12 inches in each foot times 3 feet, so 12 times 3 is 36. So 36 inches are in 1 yard. So it's kind of helpful to know when we're converting or when we're measuring how to convert between inches and feet and inches and yards and feet and yards. Metrics, it's much easier to convert because everything's on a base 10 system. So you're either multiplying or dividing by 10, which we know is just adding or taking away zeros. Customary, or sometimes you'll hear it referred to as standard units of measure that we use in the United States, are a little bit harder because they're not consistent, meaning they're not all tens and hundreds or some base of 10. So we have 12 inches equals 1 foot. You just kind of have to memorize it. There's nothing consistent. 3 feet equals 1 yard, and 36 inches equals 1 yard. Okay. We're not going to use miles too much right now. But I did want you to know that miles is appropriate for measuring some distances. And it's kind of similar in metrics to kilometers. So when we get more into metrics, we might talk more about miles. Okay. So I'm going to erase this and scroll down. And we're going to use this chart right here to complete the problems on page 496. So I'll show you what that means in just a second. The chart will be for 1 and 2, and then answers 3 and 4, you're just going to write your answer. Okay, so on the chart, we're going to be estimating length, and then we're going to measure length to the whole inch. That means no fractions or decimals, the whole thing. 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, the whole thing. Then we're going to measure to the closest half inch, and then quarter inch, and then 1/8 of an inch. So we're measuring the same thing. We're estimating, measuring to a whole inch, half inch, quarter inch, and 1/8 of an inch. And I'll show you what I mean, and that might make more sense in just a second. Okay, so we're going to read through. I copied some pages from the math textbook, and we're going to read this together. When will I use this? Well, measuring length is kind of an important life skill, just like time. You may need to go and buy something for your home or for your room at home, and you need to know if it's going to fit. Maybe I want to put up new curtains. Well, I have to know how big the window is to make sure what I buy is not going to be too small or too big. Maybe I'm trying to put new carpet down. Well, I need to know how much to buy. Especially if you're spending money, you don't want to get too much. That's a waste. But you don't want to get too little because that's going to look silly. If your carpet's a couple of feet short, it might look a little silly. Okay, so here we have this little boy and his dog, Rufus. You are going to love running around in the backyard after we get a fence. So little boy is telling his dog, you're going to love running in the backyard when we get a fence. Dad says, let's measure the backyard to see how much fencing we'll need. So this is another example. If you are putting up a fence, the materials can be pretty expensive. So you want to make sure you have enough, but you don't want to get way too much. So measuring would be very important. And you can't just go into the hardware store and just say, hey, it's about that big. You have to really know as close as you can what the actual measurement is. Okay. So here's the little boy and his dog and his dad. Okay. The last side is 6 feet long. So we'll need, so you'll see here, they have the house and they've mapped out their yard. And we haven't really talked about this yet, but some of you may have heard this from previous years. Perimeter is like putting a fence up. It's the distance around the outside of the yard. So they're measuring the distance around the outside of the yard. We call that perimeter. Of course, they don't need to put a fence where the house is. So they've left space for the house. Then from the house to the edge of the yard, they've got 6 feet. Then the width of the yard is 72 feet here, 84 feet length in the back, 72 feet and 6. So they're adding all that up and they figure out they need 240 feet. And so the little boy is telling Rufus, just think of the possibilities. Think of all that you can do with that big yard. All right, so I'm going to scroll down. Are you ready for the chapter? Well, let's find out. This is pretty easy. It just says, which figure is longer, figure A or figure B? Well, you can look just by with your eyes. You could measure it if it was really close, but here you can probably tell just by looking which one's longer. figure A is longer. Okay, and this one, figure B is longer. And then Ted is comparing his shoe to his mom's shoe, which is longer. We've got Ted's shoe, mom's shoe. These are a little bit closer, but it looks like mom's shoe is still longer. Okay. We're not going to do these right now, although I would love it if you would try. You can do those on your own for extra practice if you want to write down your answers and post them on Seesaw. But which sides are the same length? So we call these hatch marks, but let's see. We just put a line. This side here is the same length as this side here. And this side here. And another word for same length is just congruent. And those little marks are called hash or hatch marks. So opposite sides are congruent. And since they are parallel, that's a rectangle. Okay, here we have this side is congruent or the same length as that side. And this side is congruent or same length as this side. Now, this one almost looks like a square. I could measure the sides, so why don't I try to do that? I'll see. I'm going to get my ruler. And it's set up, it has centimeters on top. Well, actually, it's millimeters. So I'm going to rotate this around. And it's hard to get it completely level. Now I'm going to try to move it. And I don't want to start measuring at the edge of the ruler. I want to start at the 0. So it looks to be, and it's about 1 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to try rotating this now and see. And this here looks to be about 1 3/4 of an inch. Yeah, so by measuring, it looks like it's probably a square. It looks like all of them are the same. Sometimes you can tell with your eyes. Sometimes it's hard to tell, so it's kind of nice to just to measure to be sure. So this side is congruent. I don't know how to get that to go away. All right, I'll just move it over there to this side, this side, and this side. So if all 4 lengths are the same, then we know that that's called a square. If opposite sides are parallel, and if all 4 angles are 90-degree angles. So all of the sides have to be, opposite sides have to be parallel for it to be a square. Okay, so I'm going to erase these marks and scroll down. I don't know how to get this to go away. Close. Okay. And okay, so we're going to estimate and measure lengths. And we're going to measure to the nearest whole inch, half inch, quarter inch, an eighth of an inch. And here's a table like we have here. So I've given you a table just like this one here. All right, so let's look at their example. And this ruler is probably a little bit easier to read than the one that I have as far as the tools for the Active Inspire, but let's just do our best with it. So the directions say place the ruler against a side of a pencil. So here's my pencil. So that the 0 on the ruler lines up with one end. So notice they didn't move the ruler all the way over to the end of the pencil. They made sure the 0 was at the end of the pencil. So there's actually a little bit of room at the end of the ruler because it doesn't start until the 0. Okay. Measure the length to the nearest inch. Okay, so to the nearest inch, they've drawn a line for you where the tip of the pencil stops. And then the nearest inch, it can either be a 3 or a 4. So does this line right here look like it's closer to 3 or closer to 4? Well, I would say it's closer to 4. So if we're measuring to the nearest whole inch, it's closest to 4 inches. Yeah? Okay. Well, what about if we're measuring to the nearest ½ inch? Well, here's a 3, here's a 4. How do we find out where the ½ inch marks are? So here's a ½ inch. Here's halfway between 1 and 2. Here's halfway between 2 and 3. And here's halfway between 3 and 4. So this is 0, 1/2, 1, 1 and 1/2, 2, 2 and 1/2, 3, 3 and 1/2, 4. Okay, so they're asking us to the nearest ½ inch. Well, it looks like it's pretty close. Is it going to be closer to 3 and 1/2 inches or closer to 4 inches? I would say it's closer to 3 and 1/2 inches, just barely. So I'm going to write to the closest ½ inch, and it's pretty close to both, but I'm going to say 3 and 1/2. Okay. Then the last thing it says, oh no, we got 1/8 too. Okay. So the nearest ½ inch, well, let's find out where our quarters are. So the quarters are halfway between the half marks. So here's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. Okay, so we know that 2/4, so 2/4 is the same thing as 1/2. Right? We've done fractions enough that hopefully you guys recognize that 2/4 or 2/4, another way of saying 2/4 is 2/4 is equal to 1/2. Okay, so here I have 0 inches. I have 1/4 or 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, 1. 1 and 1/4, 1 and 1/2, 1 and 3/4, 2. So remember, a fraction is in between the whole numbers. It means it's a little bit more than a whole number, but a little bit less than the next whole number. So we have 2 and 1/4 2 1/2, 2 3/4, 3. 3 1/4, 3 1/2, 3 3/4, 4. So remember, when we have a denominator of 4, we can say 2/4 or 2/4. Means the same, right? Okay, so here is my pencil, and the line that they have it pointing to, it's really close, but I think our pencil is just a tiny bit shorter than that. But so we know we've got between 3 and 4. Those are the whole inches, but we're trying to measure to the nearest 1/4 inch. So how many quarters are we at here? 3 1/4, 3 1/2, 3 3/4. So for the 1/4 inch, right here, the nearest 1/4 inch, it's 3 3/4. Okay, so this ruler doesn't show you the eighths, but the eighths are going to be, and let me make my pencil skinnier, my pen. The eighths are going to be in between, so we have to divide each of these quarters in half, and we get the eighths. And the reason we call them eighths is because between 3 inches and 4 inches, we've divided into 8 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's why they're called eighths. So it's still really close to here. How many eighths is that? Well, let's count. 1/8, 2/8, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think it's between 5/8 and 6/8. But I think it's still closer to 6/8. Okay, 3 6/8, which is equal to 3 3/4. Those fractions are equivalent. Okay, so I'm going to erase that. And I'm going to scroll down. Okay, this says find 4 items in your classroom. We can't do that right now. You could do that around the house if you have a ruler. Since I don't know if you have a ruler at home, we're just going to kind of skip down. But let's think about this question number 1. Which is more accurate, measuring to the nearest inch or measuring to the nearest 1/4 inch? What do you think? Which one is more accurate or closest to the actual measurement? Measuring to an inch or to a 1/4 inch? What do you think? Okay, I would say measuring to the nearest 1/4 inch is more accurate. The 1/4 inch is more accurate because it's a smaller unit of measure. So a 1/4 inch is probably about that big. So when you're measuring, you might be off just a little bit, where an inch, if you were measuring and you're off by almost a whole inch, an inch is about that big, you're going to be off much more. 1/4 inch, you're going to be off less. So the one that's more accurate is measuring to a 1/4 inch. How could the length around an object, such as a globe, be measured? So what do you think about going around something that's kind of circular or spherical? Any thoughts? How might you measure something that's kind of round circular or spherical, like a ball. Okay, so there's really no wrong answer to that. It's just kind of what you think. All right, so we're gonna practice one of these together as practice, and then we're gonna do some for you to write independently. So you're gonna estimate first. So looking at this crayon, how long do you think that is? Okay, then we're gonna measure to the nearest inch, half inch, quarter inch, and eighth of an inch. So I'm gonna get my ruler and I've got to rotate it because it was on centimeters and now I've got to move it. Okay. So what do you think? To the nearest inch, well, it's a little bit more than 4, but it's less than 5. Is it closest to 4 or closest to 5? Okay, what about to the nearest half inch? So the half inches, again, are halfway between the whole. It's not going to let me write, I don't think. No, it won't let me write on it. So I'll have to write above. So the half inches are right in the middle between, but it's not letting me write on the ruler, so I'm just kind of having to put. Okay. So what do you think, measuring this crayon from here to here to the nearest half inch, what do you think it's closest to? Is it closest to 4, 4.5, or 5? Okay. After the half inch, we're going to measure to the quarter inch. So I wish that, I don't think it's going to let me write on the ruler. And I don't know a way to do that. But the quarter inch is halfway between, so maybe I can use a different color for the quarter inch. So the quarter inch is going to be halfway between the half. So like here's a quarter and here's a quarter, and then here's a quarter, 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 quarter. So when we say a quarter or 1/4, that means we're dividing our inch up into 4 sections. And each section is called a fourth or a quarter. Okay. So I wish that I could draw on the ruler, but the tool doesn't allow me to do that. So what do you think that this crayon from 0 to this line here to the nearest 1/4 or 1/4 inch? It's still somewhere between the 4 and the 5. We just got to figure out the fraction. Okay, and then the last one is 1/8 of an inch. Well, they've already marked the little eighths for you. So each little line, if you count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So every two of those tiny little lines is an eighth. So notice how the line's a little bit longer. So maybe I can make the eighths. What color can I use? I'll use this pink. So right here. So every two is an eighth of an inch. So they're a little bit longer lines. Those are each an eighth. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and then 8/8 is 1 inch. 1 1/8, 1 2/8, 1 3/8, 1 4/8, 1 5/8, 1 6/8, 1 7/8, 2 inches. Okay, so the eighths with a denominator of 8 just means I've divided my inch up into 8 sections. Okay, so on this ruler, it's where the little line is just a tiny bit longer. Okay. All right, so I'm going to erase that. And now you're going to do it kind of for real on your paper. Okay, so move that ruler out of the way. Close. All right, so length is the measurement of a line between 2 points. Inch, foot, and yard are all customary units of measure for length. So an inch is about the length of one paper clip. A foot is about the length of a textbook. A yard is about the height of a chair. So I think my table, but you can't really see it, but my kitchen table is kind of small. It's about a yard wide and about 4 feet long. Maybe about half of your sofa length is about a yard. And I'm going to scroll down. And this is the one that you're going to write on this paper right here, page 496, number 1, an estimate measured to the whole inch, measured to a half inch, measured to a quarter inch, and measured to a 1/8 of an inch. If you need to take a couple of days to do this, work on some today and tomorrow, that's okay. And remember, Monday is always kind of a catch-up day, so even Monday of next week, if you want to work on this, then that's okay. All right, so let's go back to our butterfly. And you need to rotate. The first thing you're going to do is just an estimate. So remember, an estimate's a guess. So you're going to write how long or what is the length of that butterfly. That's your guess based on what you already know about measurement and what you see with your eyes. Okay, now I'm going to move the ruler. I'm going to line up that 0 with one end of the butterfly, and then maybe let me move it so it's the other end of the butterfly. You can see where it's pointing. Okay. So using this ruler that I have on my screen, you're going to decide what is the length of that butterfly to the nearest whole inch, and you're going to write that down. Nearest half inch, you're going to write that down. Nearest quarter inch, you're going to write that down. And nearest 1/8 inch. Okay, so I'm going to wait just a second, but if you need to, you can pause the video. The ruler should still stay up there so you can write down your answers, then go on to the next problem. So I'll wait just a second, but you might need more time. Okay, so now I'm going to move. If you need more time, just pause the video. But I'm going to move on to number 2. And I'm going to rotate my ruler. It's hard to get it just right. And I'm going to move it over here. And remember, I'm using inches here, not centimeters or millimeters. This is actually marked in millimeters. So I'm using my ruler and I'm using inches. And I have my ruler lined up starting at the 0. And we're measuring these little blocks or cubes or whatever they are, connecting toys, to the other end of that line, which is right down here. Okay, so here's my 2, here's my 3. You have to decide what is the length of those blocks to the nearest whole inch, half inch, quarter inch, and 1/8 of an inch. Remember, when it's the whole inch, you won't have any fractions. You'll just have a whole number. When it's to the nearest half inch, your denominator will be 2. The nearest quarter inch, your denominator will be 4. And the nearest 1/8 of an inch, your denominator will be 8. Okay, if you need to, go ahead and pause the video while you kind of measure this out and write down your answers here. You're going to write them on number 2, estimate, whole inch, half inch, quarter inch, 1/8 of an inch. Okay, if you need more time, just go ahead and pause the video, but I'm going to close the ruler and go on to number 3 and number 4. Okay, so for number 3, it says choose the best estimate for each length. So number 3 is a bicycle. Now, this isn't drawn to scale. This isn't a teeny tiny little bicycle toy. This is just a picture of a bicycle. So you got to think in your mind, your bicycle at home, or maybe that looks like a little bit bigger, not a kid's bike, maybe an adult bike. So we're not going to use this ruler because this is just a picture of a bike. It's not an actual bike. A bike would be bigger than this. It'd be bigger than my laptop, which I'm showing you the screen. All right, so do you think a bike in length from the front part of the front tire to the back part of the back tire, if you had to estimate it, do you think it's going to be A, 12 inches, B, 4 feet, C, 12 feet, or D, 4 yards? So how long do you think a bicycle is? 12 inches, 4 feet, 12 feet, 4 yards. You can just write A, B, C, or D. You're going to write your answer here. Okay? Here's number 4, the length of a paintbrush. Again, I'm not going to use the ruler because this is not a real paintbrush. It's just a picture. So you got to think about, if you've ever painted, that looks like a paintbrush you would use to paint a wall in your home, or this, not like an artwork. This isn't something you would probably use in art. It's probably something you would use to paint around the house, a fence or walls. So they're usually about that big. So how long do you think a paintbrush is? Is it F, 3 inches, G, 8 inches, H, 3 feet, or J, 8 feet? So which one of these seems to make the most sense about how long a paintbrush is that you would use to paint like a wall or your fence or something at home? F, 3 inches, G, 8 inches, H, 3 feet, or J, 8 feet. So you're going to write your answer here. Just F, G, H, J. Okay? Write your answer here. And that's going to be all that we're going to do for today. Remember, you have today, you have tomorrow, and you have Monday to work on this. Just four quick problems. All right, thanks, guys. We'll do more with measurement next week, and we're coming down towards the end of our year. So I should be seeing you guys on Zoom tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and then a couple of you have some extra multiplication practice to do after that Zoom. But just a couple weeks of school left. Okay, so keep up the great work. I miss you guys, and just keep trying your best. Okay. All right. I'll see you tomorrow.